Right, guys, so today I'm going to be speaking with Gareth Riddy. He's one of our very top practitioners in the world, based in the UK. So Gareth, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Okay, hello. I'm Gareth. I work out of Basingstoke. I guess I'm a movement therapist, and my work is kind of half manual therapy, half gym-based exercise type stuff.
Fantastic. And what's the typical type of clientele that you work with at the moment, Gareth?
So my clients range from like combat sport athletes. I've got like quite a history of working with MMA guys, so I still have a couple of those. I have like some more run-of-the-mill gym-based stuff, and people coming to me for pain problems, movement dysfunctions, I say, and the likes. So quite a broad spectrum. Oh, and
Okay.
a competitive strongman. I'll sort him out occasionally.
Okay. So do you tend to do with these kind of guys? Is it's corrective kind of stuff and rehab based things, sort of, or is it more leaning towards performance enhancement? I mean, how do you?
Bit of
What's the
both.
typical day? Bit of both.
A bit of both, yeah. Obviously, the more sporty types is more performance enhancement. Sometimes you've got to be corrected if they've been bashed around a little bit. The other people, normal people off the street, tend to be a little bit more corrective.
Yeah, I think it's to be fair though, they're kind of one and the same thing though, right? I mean, if you're trying to get someone out of pain, you're trying to bring them back to a normal state, which means they're going to perform better. And if you're dealing with an athlete, the more I mean, performance enhancement for them is the same thing. You're just trying to normalize their system so they can function at a high level, right?
Yeah, performance is performance. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the types of clients that you work with then are kind of across the board, from
Yeah.
athletes and MMA people to your general pop. What is it that first drew you to be attracted to the Amen stuff? Because I mean, talk a bit about your background and the sort of things you've done
Yeah.
already, and then what drew you to us?
So I guess when I first started studying to become a personal trainer all them years ago, I was very fortunate that one of the tutors kind of took me under his wing, and he was quite a forward-thinking guy. So thanks, Mark, if you ever see this. And he kind of taught me to dig a little bit deeper, look into the brain, the mind, more of a holistic approach, I guess. So that always sparked my interest, and the brain was the thing which I was like, that stuff's really cool. I'm really interested. So I'd always been bubbling away, like throughout my personal training career. And then you guys cropped up years and years later, and I started following you on Facebook, and I thought this is pretty interesting stuff. And then you released your course, I jumped on it, and here I am. Since you released your first cerebellum course, and I'm still here hassling you regularly.
that's that's very true. So I think what's going to become apparent. I mean, we'll talk about some case studies in a minute, but what's probably going to become apparent for people who are listening to these interviews is that whenever I speak to a practitioner now who's doing really, really well and getting really great results, it's very obvious that you guys have studied basically all of our material. So you have
Yes.
all of the viewpoints necessary to be able to handle the sort of things that walk into the gym or to the clinic. So you've done what was previously called the Level 1, the Cerebellum course.
Yeah.
You're a neuroskeletal practitioner. Did you have a
Uh-huh.
look through the fundamental stuff as well? Was that something you did?
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
did. Yeah.
So you went to
Yeah.
fundamentals, and then subsequently you've been through the posture, the course, and the coordination stuff as well. Because you actually did our very first neuroskeletal course a while ago now, and there were some
Yeah.
things included in that that weren't included in other neuroskeletal. So I think it's just fair to say that you've had exposure to a large part of the system, and you're kind of waiting to get involved in the homeostasis stuff at the moment. So let's talk about how you apply those skills, and with any kind of particular case studies that you've had that have been particularly interesting or particularly difficult, or particularly good results that you've managed to get for people.
Okay. Well, I use the neuroskeletal stuff daily in some aspect or another, like basic, like I say basic, like normal gym type people. One of the things that I found hugely useful is a conscious proprioception file. So
Okay.
let's say I'm trying to get somebody to do an exercise and they're not feeling it where I particularly want them to feel.
Mm.
Like let's say for a squat, for instance, their knees start kicking in or something like that, and they can't feel it around the VMO.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is I'll fire up the conscious proprioception, go on the VMO, maybe around, the glute med, glute max, recalibrate, and boom, they can do it properly. They can feel it exactly where they want to feel it.
Awesome.
Or if I'm doing kind of more of a bodybuilding approach with somebody, it's really good to fire up the conscious proprioception file so they can feel it that a little bit more. They call me a bastard, and I laugh. So that's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Um,
That's something I've not like weight trained people in a long time, but that's also interesting to me, the fact that the conscious proprioception bit and the proprioceptive part of that neuroskeletal course is something that comes more towards the end of the weekend. And I always wonder whether people kind of take on how effective it can be when you start looking at that. So it's really interesting to hear that you say that's one of the most effective things that you use with people, especially in the gym environments. That's very cool.
Yeah. Everybody gets it at some point. Everybody gets the spinal stabilization posture stuff as standard. Walk through the door. That's going to happen, you know. I guess the fighters have found it useful for obviously patching them up, helping their coordination, balance, that type of stuff. So when you're taking knocks to the head, things happen. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
When it's regular. The biggest impact I've had in the client that stood out above all others was a lady that came to me beginning of last year now, and she had a long history of traumatic brain injuries from her youth, particularly in the cerebellum, and obviously we all know that can lead to all sorts of issues. And she had, oh dear, where do I start? So she couldn't coordinate properly, she couldn't sequence patterns properly.
What sort of things couldn't she do?
Like she couldn't do any kind of cross crawl program pattern.
Yep.
I tried getting her crawling and she just get confused. She, all of her one side was completely like turned in. Her foot was turned in. She couldn't really walk in a straight line properly. She was always walking into stuff. She had no sensation in loads of areas. Balance was obviously off.
Yeah.
You name it, and there was issues with this girl.
Any fine motor control stuff?
Loads. Completely loads. Yeah. She couldn't write very well. I couldn't get her to do like basic finger drills, things like that. I couldn't get her, I tried to get her to like follow a circle, and she couldn't do it. She'd like go the other way. So there was a serious connection thing with her cerebellum and her brain. The rest of her brain just wasn't. Something was up. You know, there'd been a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
And so I was working through it slowly with the stuff that I already knew, and we were having some, fairly decent results. And then your neuroskeletal course pops up, and I went on it. And the whole time through that course, I was just thinking in the back of my head, I need to get back. I need to see this girl. You know, there's so much stuff I want to see what happens. So I was like kind of sitting, rocking in my chair, thinking, I want to get back. But as soon as I got back on the Monday, I did. Started playing around, and I was like, whoa, this shit is nuts. You know what I mean? It changed everything. So to getting her coordinated again, like she could, like was it the magnocellular file and the parvocellular file? She couldn't crawl. I flashed the torch in her eyes, did all the tapping, boom, she was like up and down, like basically doing laps of the gym. And I was like,
amazing.
That's pretty interesting. And then I was trying all her proprioception. There were a lot of areas she couldn't feel, and I think for her sensation, the ventral horn file was what worked the most with her.
Right.
And I found the areas where she had no sensation, like they'd probably be a little bit colder than the rest of the body, but also you touch it, it'd be like marshmallow. It'd just be like squidgy.
Just no tone.
No tone whatsoever. No tone. So I was like trying to fire it up, nothing was happening, and then all of a sudden the muscle would cramp up, and she'd like and it'd be like she'd get an electric shock. I was like, she's like, what are you doing there? I didn't know you was touching me there. I was like, well, I've been down there for 5 minutes to be fair, trying to get stuff.
Yeah.
And then from there on, I was just like, I was a dog with a bone. I was like, I'm getting all this shit working, it's happening. So over the next couple of weeks, I was just relentless trying all these things on these muscles, and they all fire. Now she has sensation in some places she hasn't had for, well over a decade.
Amazing. So you found that the actual sensory loss in that case was, obviously it was a brain injury initially.
Yes.
So there would have been some loss of efferentation, but you found it was calibrating at the level of the spinal cord that brought the sensation back and brought the tone back to the muscles. Is that right?
A lot of it, yeah. Not all of it.
Okay.
Some of it worked well with the proprioceptions. Some of it was the ventral horn stuff.
All right. Very, very cool. And how many times a week were you working with this person?
Every day.
Every day?
Every day, yeah.
And how long was there any sort of fatigability that set in? I mean, sometimes when you work purely with a functional neurology approach, when you're not using tapping and not looking at things from a bioelectrical perspective, you have to be careful not to overstimulate the system. Did you find, was it a similar thing in this case, or was she able to tolerate a lot of work? What was it like?
I got tired.
Yeah.
I found that not really. She didn't really fatigue very often. There were a couple of occasions. There was one occasion where I had the optodrome on her, which worked really well, but I did it for a little bit too long and she had to have a lay down and went all dizzy for a little bit.
Right.
But most of the time she was surprisingly tolerant, considering how messed up she was.
Yeah, I think that's just a really good point there, Gareth. It's like when you're doing when you're calibrating the system, when you're using the tap in and you're trying to change the charge of the system, you tend not to get people getting too wiped out. But then, as you said, when you use the optodrome, which is if people don't know, it's a really powerful visual stimulus, right? I mean, you're firing the whole one side of the brain. You're firing very specific pathways of the brain very intensely, using saccades and pursuits and stabilizing the eyes all at the same time. And it's hard to know how much of that to give someone, isn't it? Like sometimes you have to just try and suck it and see and kind of see what happens with it. And sometimes you work out that it was too much. And like you say, people can sometimes, if they're compromised already, can get a bit tired. But it doesn't tend to happen so much when you're working on things in terms of changing charge. So that's interesting. So what's been where is she at now? What's the stage she's at now?
At the moment, she kind of went a little bit backwards because she had another knock to her head, and because she'd had like some serious stuff go on over the years, her head is very fragile, shall I say. It doesn't take much to get a little bit of swelling going on in there. But at the moment, she's probably the best she's ever been. Okay. Stuff is holding a lot more, which is great. You know, before I was having to redo stuff, but now she can feel most things. I have to bring her foot back out most days because I generally come in and it will have gone back in.
Right.
But on the whole, most things work quite well. One of the things that happens for her is she can't make a fist when she sees me. So I have to work quite a lot on that, and then it will all come back and she'll be making a fist and, you know, sticking her fingers up at me and stuff as normal. But I have to get her back to that.
It was quite a severe brain injury she had. It wasn't like a... Yeah, that's a shame. Okay, well, that's a hell of a good result for that person. That's changed that person's life. Is there any other interesting cases that you've worked with over the past few years?
I did have one lady come to me who... Actually, I'll backtrack a little bit. One of the fighters that I trained, he had a bit of a mental block against a certain weight with power cleans. I was like getting him ready for a fight. And it also translated to that mental block also to when he fought as well. He used to struggle to pull the trigger. He'd like be a little bit hesitant.
Okay.
But in sparring, he was a little monster. So he knew he could lift his weight, but he was slowing himself down halfway through. You'd like to see him do it, and he was getting really frustrated. So I got out my trusty torch, flashed it in his eyes, and then tapped him on the head. And he was like, "What are you doing?" and then he was sailing through that weight and getting heavier than he ever had before.
Yeah.
So the next time he fought, I'm always backstage him anyway, helping him get ready. I was backstage, flashing torch in his eyes. Everybody's looking at us strangely, which, you know, I kind of like, makes me feel special. And he said he'd never felt so relaxed and so confident in a fight, and he won, which I say was all me. Nothing to do with years of training. So no, that was me. That was me. But it helped him a lot mentally, and he had no trouble pulling the trigger. So that hesitation, that block had gone.
That's going to help.
And as a result, his other half is a solicitor, and she, not that that's relevant, but she had struggled dictating things at work. Right. So it wasn't like a full-on stutter, but she'd really, really struggled to get the words out. She'd kind of get a little bit, block herself for some reason. I think it was that same thing. Flash a torch in her eye, boom, I get a message the next day. Yeah, it's awesome, I can carry on, no problem.
That's very cool.
That block is gone. So, yeah.
I think one of the things we mentioned in that coordination course is that those pathways, both magnocellular and the parvocellular pathways, they're intrinsically linked with the limbic brain as well. They're linked with structures such as the amygdala, which means that either the pathways, if they are misfiring, it can have emotional context basically, which is kind of maybe what you've uncovered with those two people and why it's been so effective.
Yeah. It's the same with the lady with the injuries, the brain injuries.
Yeah.
Is when she gets overly stressed, it will break down again, and I'll have to flash out my torch like during the gym. You'll suddenly see coordination will just go, and she'll start getting really frustrated again. Whether it goes, frustration comes first or that comes first, I haven't quite worked out.
Yeah.
Fire it up again, and hey ho, she can move again.
That's what I found has been useful with that stuff as well. Is that when I'm teaching people coordinated patterns who haven't been able to do them for whatever reason, and you fire the pathways up, you can then use that as a fatigue marker as well for the training, can't you? You can find out when it's gone, and then you can kind of measure how much work they're able to tolerate before the pathway's fatigued, fire them up again, and then you've got another marker for improvement. So I mean that's amazing, man. You've done some amazing things with the information. So your work is it sounds kind of like half personal training, performance stuff, half kind of clinical approach.
Yeah.
And do you work? Are you always on the gym floor? Do you
No.
work in a private room? What's your setup like?
So where I am, I work in a gym, and I've also got like an office with like a massage table in the same industrial estate, but across a car park. That's about a minute walk. So I'm all in the same area, but they're both separate. So sometimes people don't want to be in the gym, and also the gym I work out of is a bit of a fighter gym. It's got a cage in, all that type of stuff. Right. So some people just don't want to go in there, you know.
Of course.
But they're usually happy to come in an office.
And the sort of one of the things we often find when we're teaching our live courses and we have the feedback from people in the room is that sometimes people are confused as to how they would fit the kind of screening we're talking about doing into their existing practice. So what's the typical length of session? You've mentioned the first thing you do when people come in is you do a posture screen. So you're checking stability in the spine, etc. If you're, say, working in a personal training session and you're going to be training the individual for performance, like weight training, whatever it is, how long do you spend on the AMN protocols compared to if you're doing like a therapeutic session? How do you split it up? How does it look?
It would really depend on the individual and what was going on. If it's like a normal kind of run-of-the-mill type thing, then it would basically be the posture stuff would get done, and then we would crack on, and I may do other stuff as we move through. Kind of, I may notice something, you know. Sometimes a guy will come to me, like for instance, we'll say one of the fighters who say my shoulder's a bit tight or whatever. I want to work on loosening these up, so I'll spend a little bit of time doing that, and then we will move into the gym-based stuff to make sure that stuff fits, drills, exercises, and the likes.
Yeah. So
it can be a half and half approach. And then there's the straight out all approach, which is generally done in the office, you know. Okay. Sometimes I find people, if I do something in a session, which they find a little bit strange, such as poking them in the spine and tapping them on the head, or getting torch out.
Which is fair.
Which is fair.
It's fair, yeah.
They generally want to know more, so sometimes that would then lead to like a full-on proper session where I can screen them properly.
Okay.
You know, otherwise it would be kind of a mix and a match kind of affair.
Okay. And if you're doing a full-on sort of therapy session, if someone's coming to you because they've heard about the sort of results that you're achieving, and maybe they've got a pain complaint or a movement problem, how long do you tend to spend with a person in that situation?
An hour.
About an hour session. Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right, amazing. So, is there anything else that you feel is worth talking to the group about in terms of your experience with AMN and maybe what you're looking forward to coming up and getting stuck into?
Well, obviously, you know, I'm looking forward to homeostasis because I've been relentlessly badgering you for, probably a year. But I'd say with A&M, it's one of those things that since I've done it and you guys have come into my life and I've come into your life and hassled you, is that I kind of, on a daily basis, I think, how the fuck did I live without this shit? You know what I mean? It's like completely changed everything I do.
Amazing.
There is still a lot of things that I've always done, but it's just changed everything for me, really. It's completely changed my approach. And cheers.
Yeah, well,
nice one.
Thanks to you as well, Gareth. It's been a pleasure working with you, pleasure talking to you today.